Hi, this is Mark from the Me Techie channel. In this video, we're going to take a look at how I create my training videos. I'm using a combination of some pretty powerful software here on my Macintosh, along with some fairly high-end audio equipment and some pretty decent cameras to bring together a combination of multimedia that allows me to train people on how to use various keyboards on my other YouTube channel. And the other YouTube channel is called My Keys to Music. So on that channel, I have various YouTube videos that teach people not how to play the keyboards necessarily, but how to operate and program their keyboards. Currently, I'm working with the Nord line of keyboards. They're made in Sweden, and they're pretty awesome instruments. They're made for professional and semi-professional musicians, and they're used all over the world. So on this channel, I thought we would just take a moment and look at how I make those videos, because every now and then people say, how do you make your videos, etc., etc. So this is how we do that. So I'm using ScreenFlow 8, and that's an application here on my Macintosh. I'm using version 8.2.2. The date of this video is March 6th, 2019, so that gives you an idea of what the vintage is. And I thought we'd just open up ScreenFlow. So what you see here is two tracks here at the bottom. These two tracks were recorded directly into ScreenFlow. So I was recording it directly into ScreenFlow as I was doing the training video. And I don't really stop much. I just start the camera, start the microphone, start ScreenFlow, and start recording. So these two tracks represent the audio. This track is the audio, and this track here is the actual screen of the laptop that I used to record this video. You can see here it's a picture of basically the user manual for the Nord keyboard. It happens to be just something I happen to be talking about for this particular lesson that I was working on. Now, in addition, I have two other things happening. I've got a camera over the actual keyboard that's pointing down, so they can see the knobs and the buttons as I push the buttons and turn the knobs. They can see that in real time. That part of it. Then I have another camcorder running, which is on this track over here, or this audio file, which pictures me, much like you're seeing here. And those are recorded separately, and I just take the SD card from each camera and then load them onto the computer and then drag them into ScreenFlow. So I end up with what amounts to 4 tracks. So I've got 2 cameras, a computer screen, and audio. But you'll notice that there's actually 3 audio at the moment, because when the cameras are recording, they record both the video and the audio. And the camera audio is lesser quality. The good quality comes from my microphone, the same one you're hearing me on right now. It's more of a high-end microphone, and it's a rich tone, and it's much better than a traditional built-in camera microphone from any of the cameras that you'd get, which is why so often you see people get a camera, but then they put a microphone on top of it because the quality's better. Well, in a sense, I've got a microphone here. You can't see it. Well, here it is. That's what the microphone looks like. It's one of those big microphones. And so now I've got all that. So what I do by keeping this audio in here temporarily, it allows me to sync it up. So I'm going to put my headphones on, and you're going to hear me and watch me edit this video. Okay, so the first thing I do is I get the film cropped, because right now ScreenFlow records whatever screen resolution your machine happens to be recorded in or presented in. So in this case, it's 3360 by 2100, which is not a good size for YouTube or anything else for that matter. So I go right to crop, and I crop to this 1920 by 1080, which happens to be a default setting. Then I change the background of my canvas, if you will, to this color here, which is like a dark blue. That way, if I don't have anything on the screen, at the very least, you'll see the dark blue as my background canvas. Then I click this checkbox, and now I've got this working area here. This little white area is what I have to work with. So then I'll hold the Option and Command key and the 0 key, and that brings me in so that it's actually 1920 by 1080. All right, so then that's the first thing I do. The next thing I do is I change it from 30 frames a second to 60 frames a second. That gives me more fidelity, so that when I edit the screen, I'm able to make iterations in the up to 60 increments per second, which is pretty high fidelity. So that's what I've just done now. So that's the basics. So what I do here is I want to zoom into these tracks and look to line them up. So what do I mean by line them up? I literally just eyeball the audio and line it up like this. And then I'll zoom in even a little bit more here. You can see now I'm really zoomed in. And then I can make some fine-tuning adjustments and get them all lined up visually. And then I listen to the audio to see if I have any overlap or echo, and that tells me if they're lined up. In this lesson, we're talking about the Nord stage. Perfect. Now this track is a little lower in volume, so I'm just going to raise it to max, just so I hear all three tracks, just again, to line everything up. I also have to line this up over here because these two tracks go together, so that's technically where it needs to be. In this lesson, we're talking about the Nord Stage 3. It's perfect. It's actually, I don't hear any echo, I don't hear a delay or anything like that. So this is the beginning of the track, so I'm going to put my scrubber here and then create an out point, which says basically I want to cut everything to the left. So what I've done now is I've just ripple deleted everything from the left on, so that way the video actually starts where I start talking. In this lesson, we're talking right there. In this lesson, that's the first thing you hear. So it's perfectly lined up. Now, the only audio that I'm interested in keeping is the main audio here on the Scarlett 1818 USB. That's this microphone, the main microphone. These audio tracks, I need the video from those tracks, but I don't need the audio. So I'm gonna select both of these tracks and go up to my audio setting and make those 0. I don't want to hear those. So now all I'm left with is just the main audio track, and it should be a nice, warm, non-echoey type sound. Let's listen. In this lesson, we're talking about the Nord Stage 3, the additional system set. Perfect. And it's much like you're hearing me through this mic because it's essentially the same mic with the same equipment. All right, so I've got that synced, and I've got the audio taken care of. Now, on this Scarlett USB, I'm using something called a Focusrite 1818. And it's a piece of equipment that allows me to play my keyboards and have multiple tracks coming into the computer simultaneously, while ScreenFlow can then separate them later during the editing process. Let me show you what I mean. I have, even though you see one track here, there's actually several tracks embedded within. So I'm going to extract those now and bring those out one by one. So the first track I want to extract happens to be on channel 6, which is the left side of my keyboard, the actual keyboard sound. And then I'm going to right-click and extract channel 5, which is the right side of the keyboard because it is a stereo keyboard, sending stereo out signal. And then the third audio I'm going to extract is channel 1, which is me actually talking. So in a sense, even though I started with one track, embedded within that one track are actually multiple tracks. In this case, I only need 3. I need the left and right on the keyboard and my talking. But now that I have all of those extracted beautifully and separated by themselves, I can just throw away the audio, the main audio that I used. It's not needed anymore. Now I've got 6 tracks. So I want to condense these tracks, and ScreenFlow gives you this nice little arrow over here to make these tracks a little smaller in height so that you can fit more and you have more breathing room for the actual editing at the top. So here now all my tracks are miniaturized, if you will. Now this main audio track, what I like to do is I like to use this option called smooth volume levels. And what that does is it evens out the sound so that if I happen to go away from the mic like this, or if I'm really on top of the mic, this will smooth out the audio and make it all even, essentially. All right, so I see some red in here because I left it at 190 from my first edit there way back at the beginning of the video. So I just need to bring that back to 100. Okay, so now what I have here is a perfect audio track. It is, it has been smoothed and it's at 100%, and it should sound great. We're talking about the Nord Stage 3, and it does sound very good. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, let me just change things up a little bit. I'm going to put a quick intro. So I basically want a slide that introduces the lesson visually and creates a little animation effect. So for that, I'm using a program called Keynote, which is a free program that comes with your Macintosh. And I'm going to open up a file that I've been working on here. And essentially, this represents, each slide on this Keynote represents a separate lesson. And the beginning of this is an animated intro. So now I've got to figure out what this lesson is called. This is going to be called Program Area. I'll just say Program Prefs. Prefs, Pro Intro. Pro initialization, so that's in it. And what else are we doing? Panic and mono out. Okay, so there's a lot there. So I want to center this. Okay, but that's it. This is my slide. It happens to be on, let's see what we got here. It's on 79. So 79 slides so far, 79 lessons. All right, now I go back to ScreenFlow and I have a quick key combination which allows me to record. And I won't be able to record that right now because I'm currently recording this video. So I'll pause this video and I'll record that intro and then I'll show you what it's like after I'm done. Okay, I'm back. So what I did while I was away there is I recorded a quick introduction video, or snippet, I should say. And I'm going to show you what that looks like now. I'm going to put this head track at the topmost layer. In this lesson, we're talking about the Nord Stage 3, the additional system settings and preferences. And I'll stop it right about here, right just a touch before the track ends. And I'm going to cut my head track just like this and delete this because I don't want to see my head. I want to see the actual animated slide. So now I'm going to bring the slide up. So that's what you see while the talking is going on. So it should look like this. In this lesson, we're talking about the Nord Stage 3, the additional system settings and preferences. We're going to look at each one of those buttons. Or blends right into my head talking. All right, perfect. That's the next thing I do. Then the next thing I do is, you see this green screen here. We need to use that green screen and make my background invisible. So I do that using this option here under video, which is I've got a saved configuration here called large head. And what I do is I just adjust the cropping for that, and it basically does all the work for me, but I saved it earlier. And essentially what I do is I just add a chroma key. So let me just delete the chroma key. This is what it looks like with the green screen in its original state. And then you simply add a filter called chroma key in ScreenFlow, and just like magic, it takes out the background, just like that. Now I'll reduce my head a little bit and put it over in the left-hand corner. This allows me to look left and read to the people from the manual. So let's just see what that looks like. In this lesson, we're talking about the Nord Stage 3, the additional system settings and preferences. We're going to look at each one of those buttons and look at what's underneath that we haven't already talked about, and where to get to the information that you need to get to in order to save and change those settings. In addition, we're going to talk about other miscellaneous things such as what the panic button does, the MIDI light, and the program initialization button. Okay, so first the panic button. Okay, so in those first 24 seconds, I'm really just introducing everything that the video is going to talk about, which is unusual for me to take 24 seconds to do that. But because I really don't have any background, I have a couple of choices here. I could make a blank background and just kind of bullet point out the things I plan on covering, but that's inconsistent from all the other lessons I've done. So what I think I'll do is just talk directly to the people. So I'll put my head in the middle of the video and make it a little bigger because it's just me talking. And I'll remove all the background images. So I'm going to grab these two tracks here and make them invisible. And that's the keyboard itself, make that invisible. And this is all you're going to see here. So when I'm talking here in those first 24 seconds, and change those settings and a blank. In addition, we're going to talk about other Okay, so there's that. Now, when I start talking and looking at the actually shift transpose, what the panic button does, the MIDI light button, that's up here. It's actually shift. So I'm talking here, the program initialization button. Okay, so first the panic button. So I'm talking about a panic button. So the panic button is going to be on the keyboard itself. So I'm going to make a transition here. This is a transition. It's called, what's it called? Insert. It's called a video action. And what that means is it changes from one state to another. So in this case, it's going to go from invisible to visible. And what's going to be visible is this keyboard right here that you see in the background. So this is the keyboard pictured from the overhead camera. So at the same time that I'm bringing in the keyboard, I'm going to make a video action on my head so that I can move myself down and to the left, sort of out of the way. And because these buttons are mostly left-oriented, I think I'm going to move myself on the right. And now that should be good. Let's just see. Yes, okay, good. So that's where I'm going to go. So watch what happens here. It's going to go from no keyboard and a big head to a small head with keyboard. Here we go. Okay, so first the panic button. That's up here. It's actually shift, just like that. My head zooms down and we're there. All right, so let's hear what I have to say and let's see what other edits I need to make. Shift transpose will be the panic button right there. If you experience hanging notes when using the Nord Stage 3 in a MIDI setup, or if all current sound should be... Okay, so here's something interesting. You see my head looking left because I'm reading from my laptop. I'm actually reading from the manual while explaining it here. And I really want them to see what the manual says. I want that pictured there. So in this case, I'm changing my mind here. Instead of my head going to the right, I actually want my head to go to the left because I read one way in one direction. And I'm going to be here on the left. And then because I'm only dealing with this part of the keyboard, I'm going to crop that part of the keyboard. So I'm going to grab this track here and literally crop out the parts that I don't need to discuss and just focus on this center red area. And I'm going to put that up here and make it a little smaller so I have room for the manual itself. Okay, and then I'm going to make, at this same transition here, I'm going to, let's make this visible, and this is the manual itself. So I'm going to, obviously it's too magnified now, so let me bring it down here. And let's see what I'm talking about, what part I'm talking about, so that I can focus on it. Panic button, that's up here. It's actually, all right, so I'm talking about the panic button. So I want to isolate this area here and just focus the attention on that. So I'm going to crop this screen, which is basically my laptop being screencasted here. Now look, notice how I've made these the same size. That's pretty good. So, but let me just make the crop a little different. So I'm going to make this crop here and split the difference and make it a little wider here. And then as wide as I can on top without showing that gray bar. Okay, good. So now I've got just about the same amount of width. Okay, let's make this width a little wider here. And I'm trying to make these even is what I'm trying to do. It's just so it is more presentable. All right, so now I basically have picture this up here, picture this here. Maybe bring both of these over to the center a little bit more. I have an option here that I can arrange and align horizontal center. Yeah, there we go. All right, so just move this up here, move this down here like that. Okay, so essentially I've got, but those are still not exactly where I want them. So I want them kind of split the difference. Okay, and then I want to round them a little bit. I can round their corners by just selecting them and putting a 20% round, or yeah, 20 point round. Check that out. So here's what it looks like. Panic. Okay, now this, I have to hide this screen in the background until it's ready to be presented. Okay. So I'm talking, center of the screen. The light, and the moment I'm ready to talk to them about the keyboard itself. Button. Okay, so first the panic button, that's up here. It's actually, I do that here. And then this needs to appear, so this needs a transition as well. So I need a transition there on this track, which is the computer track. And there it is. So now they're going to see the manual and the keyboard simultaneously. That's up here. It's actually talking about the panic button. Transpose will be the panic button right there. Right here. If you experience hanging notes when using the Nord Stage 3 in a MIDI setup, or if all I'm looking at it sound should be terminated for some other reason. So it makes it look like I'm actually reading it. Which is the shift and transpose which I am. Function. This will execute an internal, but it keeps a natural off message and reset presentation. Incoming control messages. CC messages are. Now look, I'm thinking here. Change setting. So that's a long pause. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that long pause by putting my scrubber here and pushing I on the keyboard, making an in point, and then O for out point. And I'm going to swallow this space using a technique called ripple delete. And it's used so often that I actually have a command delete for it. In other words, you have a quick key for it. So command delete will delete that and swallow it up and bring the right tracks all the way over and swallow the space. So now it's going to be a nice, there'll be a jump cut. You'll see my head jolt a little bit, but at least they won't have to listen to the pause. Our messages are control change settings. Like that. So with that in mind, an example of when your keyboard might hang, where the notes might stick, is if you have it connected to a third-party keyboard or another third-party device, and you're either sending signal out or receiving signal in, and you get disconnected from your MIDI cable. A lot of times that will cause a hang, the notes will stick, and if you hit the panic button, all those notes will be eliminated and stopped, and it's just a normal and common thing to have on most MIDI devices is a panic switch, or a panic button in this case. Okay, so that created a complete thought there. So the first minute and 24 seconds, I introduced everything in the lesson, and I actually got the first point of the lesson done, which is this panic button. I'm not happy with the size of my head because I have so much room here to burn. It doesn't make sense to have just a little head over here on the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this original transition way back here where I adjusted the head and put my cursor here and make it a little bigger so that it fits better, like that. Now it's going to be more engaging, and it will be easier to be engaged because it's a large head. But because these tracks are cut now, the moment I go to this track, you'll see that the head is still small from its original edit. So there's a trick that you can do here, which is you copy this little transition, you copy the transition, and then using a keyboard combination, you can paste that size information into the next cut on the same track. And that way the head is the same between the cut. Watch this.
Control change.
There it is. Now, it does have the jolt, and there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, to avoid the jolt, you would almost have to do an entire lesson in a single take, which is a tall order on something complicated like a keyboard, and you're talking about MIDI, you're reading from the manual, you're having to push the right button and do all the right things. You'd really have to rehearse a lot in order to do a 10-minute video without a single mistake in order to avoid any kind of editing. And then would the pace be perfect? Would you have no long pauses? Did you actually say the right thing? Was the lighting correct the whole time? So it's nearly impossible to make an entire video without doing some form of editing. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop this video because otherwise we would go on for hours here as you watch me edit this whole video. The entire video is 8 minutes and 27 seconds. And as a rule, to do a video between 5 and 8 minutes, to edit that with everything you saw here, and I was going at about half the pace that I would normally, it takes about an hour and a half, depending. Maybe sometimes even less, sometimes as low as a half hour to edit that, to get it to a point where you can upload it to the course engine or to YouTube or anything like that. Now, actually, I spend a lot more time editing videos for YouTube because I put some marketing stuff, logos, animations. I make it as perfect as I can. So it's not uncommon for me to spend about 15 hours of editing per YouTube video. Now, some of my videos are 40 minutes in length. So, 14 hours, 40 minutes, it makes a little bit more sense. But if it's a 10-minute video, I'm probably going to take 8 to 10 hours to edit it for YouTube. For a training course, that same 8 to 10 minutes, because it's more lesson focused and I don't need all the propaganda and the background music and the logos and the subscribe here and to say everything just perfectly, it's just a lesson. In that case, it's about a minute and a half, an hour and a half to edit it or less. All right, so hopefully you learned a little bit about how I do some editing and my thought process behind all this, and you learned just a touch of some of the controls. There's a lot more to learn, and probably if you've never done this before, a lot of this just went over your head and you'll have to watch it again or watch some other videos taking it from square one. But this gives you a gist of what it's like to edit a video for training purposes. And thanks for watching.